Welcome back, Marvelous fans, to another highly requested video on the dogged menace, the most iconic double agent in S.H.I.E.L.D. history, and the Red Skull's right-hand man, Captain Brock Rumlow, or, as he's more popularly known, the relentless Crossbones. He's a pretty memorable character, at least for us geeks and fans of the Marvel comics and films. In today's video, we'll be observing his rise to the fabled double agent for Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. and what an absolute force of nature he really is. A towering villain in the lore and legacy of Captain America, a character who often gets swept under the rug among the elite supervillains that Marvel already boasts, ludicrously enough, because this guy's an absolute powerhouse. We're going to do this in two halves. Firstly, we're going to retrace his comic book origins, followed by the cinematic adaptation of the character in the MCU to attempt a complete breakdown and analysis of his abilities and arcs throughout the years. This will help us comprehend the scope and tenacity of a character whose iconography is enshrined in our hearts and minds, and one we have no trouble recalling whatsoever. Before we get too deep into Crossbones, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Anyways, before we digress any further, let's get right into it and get cracking. Come on! What is Crossbones' origin? Crossbones, aka Brock Rumlow, is a supervillain who has made appearances in an enduring catalog of issues and series published by Marvel Comics, primarily as one of Captain America's arch-nemeses who is often seen in cahoots with Hydra, marauding and leading a throng of forces under the guise of Agent Rumlow for S.H.I.E.L.D. to gather intel for the Red Skull's abhorrent designs of setting the world in disarray to pave the way for a new world order brimming with the seeds of totalitarian domination and subversion of free will and resistance. Rumlow first debuts in issue 359 of Captain America in October of 1989 and was later revamped for a major reappearance later that same month in issue 360, yet his name wasn't revealed until 362, which was published next month in November. His comic book arcs depict him as a mercenary, working in the employment of other villainous factions and entities such as the Red Skull and Hydra. Rumlow serves as one of the longest-standing arch-rivals of Captain America, who was a key figure in the aftermath of Civil War, where Captain America was assassinated. While he may not have been the one who delivered the killing shot, he was still a proactive participant whose presence there served as a contingency to ensure that the assassination was carried out without fail. His most iconic look is one in which he's donning a skull mask and tactical body armor with an insignia painted on his chest that's a visual motif symbolic of his epithet and identity as Crossbones. Over the years, the character has been adapted into an overarching series of movies and series meant for TV and the internet available across OTT platforms, having been portrayed and voiced by Frank Grillo in films such as Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, and Avengers: Endgame in 2014, 2016, and 2019 respectively. He was also in the Disney Plus animated series What If, and he's voiced many alternate versions of the character. How did Brock become Crossbones? Rumlow's penchant for violence can be traced back to his days as a fiery youth who led the Savage Crims gang on the Lower East Side of New York. After he brutally assaulted the 15-year-old Rachel Layton, two of her brothers sought him out in vengeance and made him pay in blood and sweat. However, Rumlow wasn't going to let that slide. Being the delinquent youth that he was, he killed the brothers in return to restore his reputation for fear-mongering and notoriety. He was forced into hiding and subsequently fled to find his way into the Taskmaster's School for Criminals. He earned his place as a promising combatant and, within a span of just 3 years, got promoted to become an instructor under the name Bingo Brock. Rumlow would then, having been trained as an expert marksman, skilled in espionage and military warfare, begin operating alone as a soldier of fortune, offering his services to the highest bidder for copious amounts of money. He was soon enlisted by the dubious terrorist organization Hydra. He enlisted with its African wing under the patronage and leadership of the communist Red Skull, aka Albert Malik, in Algeria, serving under the alias Frag. He was sent on a mission to invade Arnim Zola's chateau in Switzerland, where he was the only one to make it out alive from the assault against overwhelming odds as things went haywire. This impressed the Nazi Red Skull, Johann Schmidt, who offered him the chance to swear fealty and obeisance to the supreme and uncontested leadership of Schmidt and accepted Brock's services, giving him the codename of Crossbones, who would terrorize Captain America, the Avengers, and S.H.I.E.L.D. in the years to come, and plays an instrumental role dubbing in and out of both worlds as a double agent tasked with gathering intel for Hydra. What are Crossbones' key encounters with Captain America? Crossbones and Cap have crossed paths on many occasions ever since the former was introduced in the comics. As Crossbones rose through the echelons of the criminal underworld, he became more of a threat and was among the select few who had the nerves and skills to trade blows with Captain America, despite being bested on almost every occasion. It is, however, remarkable that he almost never failed to stir unrest and disarray among the Avengers, often by raiding their facilities, robbing them of valuable assets, or setting them against each other. This just goes to show how skilled of a tactician he is. It also demonstrates how well-versed he is in the intricacies of the mind, especially when it comes to espionage and warfare. Cap and Crossbones first meet when Rumlow is sent on a mission by the Red Skull to ambush and eliminate Captain America, who at the time is investigating one of Schmidt's schemes. They soon become involved in a high-stakes fight in a showdown of masterful combat prowess. Another major event is when the two clashed in Captain America Volume 5, Issue 11, published in 2005. In this issue, Rumlow was sent to retrieve the fragments of Ulysses' Bloodstone, a rare bloodstone created by the Elders. The stone has the power to conquer and transform other continuums into replicas of theirs, granting its bearer the ability to travel across time and space. The Bloodstone encased an evil synthetic form of life known as the Hellfire Helix, which harbored great magical powers but required the Bloodstone's protective shell to survive within Earth's time frame. Crossbones shadowed Baron Zemo in his hunt for the fragments. While Zemo battled Captain America, Crossbones knocked out Cap's pilot stealthily and stole two of the Bloodstone fragments, which were under the control of the Hellfire Helix. Crossbones destroyed the Helix with a crossbow bolt. After the death of Steve Rogers, which, as we later find out, was due to him being time-trapped, Bucky Barnes donned the suit of Captain America. Crossbones launched an attack on Barnes, and a brutal fight ensued. Crossbones threw Bucky out of a building, but he was saved by Natasha Romanova. Bucky then shot Crossbones in the chest, and after a near-fatal face-off, Crossbones was once again taken into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. In the storyline Avengers Standoff, we see Crossbones as an inmate of Pleasant Hill, a highly secure community established by S.H.I.E.L.D. As it so happens, when Steve Rogers was at the Pleasant Hill bowling alley, Kobik's abilities de-aged Rogers back to his physical prime, allowing him to take on Crossbones and crush him. This version of Rumlow would go on to found a novel version of Hydra with the Red Skull and his daughter, Sin. What is Crossbones' role in the Skeleton Crew? The villainous Skeleton Crew was a criminal organization formed by Crossbones, Sin, and other mercenaries. They would engage in a series of high-profile and precarious operations. Introduced first in issue 432 in the year 1994 and created by Mark Gruenwald, the Skeleton Crew primarily rose from a need to interpose and countermand Captain America to dispose of him and sabotage his operations. Their shared contempt for the Captain was what propelled them to gather in arms and rage in unison under the banner of the Skeleton Crew. The name is taken after the motif of Crossbones. Rumlow assembled a group of mercenaries and henchmen who had worked for the Red Skull to lead a search for their missing leader. The crew initially came together in search of Red Skull after his disappearance when Magneto had him imprisoned in an arcane bunker somewhere under the ground. They fought the Black Queen and her Hellfire Club mercenaries in their quest. Crossbones then sought out and enlisted the aid of psychic Tristan Micawber to locate the Red Skull. After finding his employer, Crossbones took the Red Skull to Skull House for convalescence. Crossbones had a formidable run-in with the Skull Crew, but was eventually disbanded after his falling out with the Red Skull for questioning his methods and intentions when Red Skull decided to be allied with the Viper. He was then relieved of his services and lost his authority in the Skull Crew as well, but he's not someone who budges, nor does he conform without giving hell to those who betray or counter him. The Skull Crew was his brainchild, in essence, a labor of love that he was unwilling to let go of. Desperate to regain his position as the leader of the crew, he devised an elaborate scheme that would reinstate his authority as sole leader. He kidnapped Diamondback, aka Rachel Layton, to imprison her in an abandoned subway station and forced upon her a brutal regime of combat training. Crossbones believed that he had successfully brainwashed her into betraying Captain America. His plan was to set her after Cap to compromise his plans and extort information, seize collectibles, and seize Captain America's blood samples from the Avengers Mansion to regain the favor of Schmidt and his authority. While his venture didn't prove to be a success, he was back in business again as usual, and he was rehired by the Red Skull on a temporary assignment. Cutthroat, who was the now newly appointed leader of the Skeleton Crew and Schmidt's right-hand man, attacked Rumlow as he was afraid that Crossbones would be after his head. Brock Rumlow since has absconded and reassembled the gang, primarily to further the schemes and ambitions of Hydra in some of the canon events and arcs, for instance in the Civil War and the Secret Empire. Crossbones in MCU. Origin of Crossbones. How did Brock Rumlow become Crossbones? In the MCU, Brock Rumlow was in essence a Hydra infiltrator who had been posing as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and the field commander of the strike team. He's no less skilled than his comic book counterpart, which can be attributed to the training that he received from working with two world-class organizations, though serving disparate and opposing ideals, but are held in high regards for their inventory, artillery, and overall combat superiority down to the last man serving. However, keeping his affiliations, Rumlow was already quite skilled in weapons, martial arts, and is quite formidable in pure brawling, where the strongest fist reigns victor. After the Battle of New York, Rumlow's strike team was ordered to return the scepter to Hydra. After this, Rumlow was seen following Captain America on several missions where he proved to be an indispensable asset to the team, taking down violent criminal organizations and neutralizing threats or mob hits across the world. However, in The Winter Soldier, we witness the true unveiling of the cold, calculated prowler that he is, who cannot be deterred from his unwavering loyalty and promise to serve Hydra until the end. And soon, when Captain America was declared excommunicated and wanted under the orders of the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Alexander Pierce, Rumlow led his team to assassinate Cap. The Hydra uprising reached its apex and its schemes were laid bare and thwarted during the battle at the Triskelion, where Rumlow suffered a crushing defeat that nearly claimed his life by a helicarrier while engaged in a fight against Sam Wilson, which eventually left horrific facial scarring on his face. After his recovery and the seeming collapse of Hydra, he became a rogue contractor, leading a terrorist faction and assuming a new sobriquet of Crossbones, carving out his own path of a hellish legacy to make those who were involved in bringing about his downfall pay for the suffering that he had to endure. During a mission in Nigeria, Crossbones had lured the Avengers into a public battle under the guise that he was making an attempt at stealing a bioweapon. It was during this chaotic upheaval, amidst a stampede in a busy bazaar, Crossbones met Captain America and exchanged a flurry of punches and kicks, but couldn't contend with the overwhelming supremacy of Steve Rogers. As a last resort, Rumlow detonated a suicide vest, but Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, diverts him mistakenly into an apartment that was brimming with unarmed civilians and residents, which killed him and several Wakandan relief workers in the process as well. What is Crossbones' personality like? At the outset, we can see that Brock Rumlow was among the finest elite combatants and tacticians with skills in espionage that are irrefutable. After all, he was the commander of S.H.I.E.L.D's strike force, which speaks volumes about his reputation and military expertise. As a shrewd tactician, Rumlow never appeared to give in to personal motivations or impulses, yet he was never particularly endearing either. His primary focus was always the mission. He'd do whatever it took to get the job done, no matter the cost. Whether through guile or deceit, he shows no moral constraints or qualms in his actions. He's someone who's unafraid of death, fully aware of the risks involved in this line of work. This lack of fear makes him all the more dangerous both as an assailant and as a foe. His principles revolve around combat and the rewards it offers him and his employer. In this case, as we know, his allegiance lies with Hydra, the organization he aligns himself with, drawing inspiration from its ruthless ideology. However, the version of Rumlow we see in the MCU isn't exactly the hardened sociopathic killer that his comic counterpart is. The movies don't explore his full backstory or the events that led to him becoming a double agent or mercenary, details that are very much present in the comics. In the source material, Crossbones is fueled by a personal vendetta against Captain America, and his deep hatred for Steve Rogers often supersedes his duties to Hydra. His quest for revenge is one of his driving forces, and it plays a significant role in his character development. In the MCU, while Rumlow is highly skilled, endowed with exceptional combat and espionage abilities, he doesn't possess the superhuman enhancements he has in the comics. In the comics, Rumlow's enhancements come from an intense combat training regime rather than any serum, making him a far superior fighter to what we see on screen. His training and expertise make him a formidable opponent, but he remains more grounded and human in the MCU. Moreover, in the comics, Crossbones is one of Captain America's major villains, often playing a central role in key storylines. In cinematic adaptations, however, his presence is significantly mellowed, and he plays more of a secondary role in the larger narrative. As a result, he never truly proves a serious threat to Captain America or the Avengers, especially compared to other major villains in the MCU. In the films, we first encounter Rumlow as a highly motivated individual with a degree of cockiness. His unwavering loyalty to Hydra is evident, even though he occasionally expresses admiration for Rogers' abilities as a soldier. However, his tendency to take things to extreme lengths is a hallmark of his criminal nature. After suffering a severe injury, he shows a reckless disregard for human life, even willing to sacrifice 2 of his own men in an attempt to kill Black Widow with a grenade. When his plans go awry, he reveals his more sadistic nature, reveling in the excess of violence which is evident by his actions in Nigeria. Rumlow's ego and his penchant for brutality make him an unpredictable and dangerous foe. But his motivations in the MCU are often more about loyalty to Hydra than personal vendettas, except of course when he goes rogue in Nigeria seeking vengeance and retribution against the Avengers. Does Crossbones have enhanced strength? In the films, we have seen that Rumlow has proactively been part of a few missions that Captain America led, and his role was never that of a mere henchman or a buffer supply of force in those operations. He was an expert marksman and was deft in sharpshooting. He could accurately shoot a rope with his crossbow with near superhuman precision to save Captain America from falling, or land a single shot to the target's head while performing something as compromising and vulnerable as parachuting. Of course, it goes without saying that to be a double agent at S.H.I.E.L.D., you have to be a pretty good spy to pull off the job. Not only did he manage to hide his true identity, he even managed to build a bond of camaraderie with Captain America and Black Widow as well in operations. Being an assassin, he was highly skilled in taking out targets, as witnessed in the scene when he coordinated a shooting of pirates while planning a rescue of the hostages. He even managed to ambush other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, taking them out with ease during the battle at the Triskelion. We've seen his tactics on display after he abandoned Hydra and began working with an independent contractor. His knowledge of covert warfare and infiltration has allowed him to escape some dubious encounters where he staged heists or attacks. When he and his band of mercenaries planned to storm the Institute for Infectious Diseases lab in Lagos, his use of garbage trucks to break into the area to avoid suspicion shows his experience in military infiltration, and the way he disarmed Captain America of his most useful weapon to attach an explosive to the shield just goes to show how cunning and quick he is on his toes. After his facial scarring, Rumlow returned with newfound enhancements and abilities in the movies, where Natasha's attempt to electrocute him failed, which could possibly be a result of severe nerve damage as well. Nonetheless, it proved to be an enhancement that aided him in enduring more damage without weakening him severely as an ordinary individual would. After the battle at the Triskelion, he became Crossbones and began using new equipment, including a weaponized gauntlet that offered him increased strength, and the armor that he donned, which could sustain killing blows or shots to the chest against a superhuman foe like Captain America. By harnessing the hydraulic functions of his gauntlet, Crossbones could contend toe-to-toe with Captain America for quite a while, giving him a tough time in combat, but not for forever, as it was taken apart by the super soldier after just a few exchanges. What weapons and equipment does Crossbones use? Rumlow is a master who dabbles into the ancient, arcane, and the most tactical of weapons. Boasting an impressive inventory of knives, tasers, crossbows, guns, and explosives, he's no stranger to the ways of combat and has just the right set of tools and assets to evade and capitalize on every situation with his tactical awareness, coupled with an unsullied acumen for warfare, especially at close quarters, which makes him formidable if you're uninitiated in the ways of war and combat. He has the ability to draw out his opponents and lure them to meet him on his own turf, or maneuver under circumstances where others would ordinarily crumble, especially against the likes of towering superheroes like Captain America, Black Widow, and Sam Wilson, who have their share of experience in combat as well. From what we've seen in the films, Rumlow was highly skilled in handling knives in combat and had a flair for it. This is first seen with how quickly he was able to draw out his weapon and disarm Sharon Carter before she even had the opportunity to react. Even when he used his gauntlets, his inclination for blades could be seen once more in the retractable blades that came protruding at the captain when the two fought, with the latter being superior in combat in martial arts and easily dodging his quick stabs and slashes by virtue of his enhanced reflexes. Apart from his love for blades, we've seen him and his strike team use the taser rod to subdue Captain America and arrest him, but they quickly learned a lesson in combat when Steve schooled them in what seemed to be a predetermined scenario where the most elite force of S.H.I.E.L.D. were made to look like a bunch of amateurs. However, amidst all the others, Rumlow stood firm and was the last to go down, and not without delivering a few good blows to the captain before he was eventually overpowered right before Cap muscles his way out of the lift and drops out of a building and onto his shield. Apart from this, we've also seen him use a range of handguns, including the SIG Sauer P226 Super Capacity, which he was seen carrying while looking for the Captain and Natasha in a mall in Washington, D.C. In other encounters, we also saw him handling the iconic Desert Eagle Mark 19 during an assault on a police station in Nigeria, and the Glock 19, which is the standard sidearm for every strike operative, which he's seen carrying in missions, such as when he escorted Loki's scepter out of Stark Tower. What are Crossbones' weaknesses? Brock Rumlow's prowess as an operative or as a double agent is undeniable, but his over-reliance on advanced gadgetry and technology does reveal significant weaknesses he has as a fighter. Skilled as he may be in hand-to-hand combat and espionage, he still has an almost reflexive or an instinctive tendency to lean heavily on his weaponry and tech to gain the upper hand in battles that often compromises his ability to adapt to new situations. He becomes predictable in his skills and tendencies, which is why Captain America has almost no trouble thrashing him every time they cross paths. Over the years, Rumlow as a fighter has only become more susceptible, given to rage and personal vendettas, which is never a marker for assured success unless you revamp your skills in combat and reflect on your mistakes, which is never the case with Rumlow, who's more keen on disposing his enemies with enhanced equipment. His use of high-tech gear as Crossbones, which includes energy shields and advanced explosives, might offer him an edge in certain situations, but it also significantly highlights his vulnerability as a combatant when his tech fails, which is what happens in his confrontation with Steve Rogers in Captain America: Civil War, where we see that he is almost struggling with his enhancements to keep up with the ferocity of Captain America. For starters, while it may have added to his advantage in terms of strength and defense, it has also stripped him of agility, and he almost seemed sloppy in multiple instances where his defense was untenable and he had very little to offer in terms of overwhelming Captain America as his gadgetry began failing him. Additionally, Rumlow's lack of superhuman abilities, unlike other adversaries in the MCU such as the Winter Soldier or the Red Skull, further exposes his limitations against someone like Captain America, who was literally built to fight without rest or healing for prolonged periods. Marvelous verdict! Crossbones in the movies has definitely been a delight to watch, though we don't see him in his true element as we do in the comics. The enigma and anticipation that heralded his arrival in the comics is something we see lacking in the films. While he may have been on the cusp of some canon-altering events in the movies, his agency as an adversary is severely limited, and so is his scope. There's very little development in his arcs or character throughout the films, and that's not to say we'll never see it in the future. The possibilities are ripe and immense. A show focusing on his affiliations with Hydra and his origins, leading a gang in the Lower East Side to becoming a hardened mercenary under the tutelage of Taskmaster, could be fascinating. We, for one, certainly want to see more of Frank Grillo in the Crossbones costume. What about you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.